The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. This is the United Podcast Network.
Want to shake up your small business marketing? I mean, really shake it up.
Studio 21 Podcast Cafe.
Have you been thinking about doing your own podcast?
Studio 21 Podcast Cafe.
Would you like to take your business to the next level?
Studio 21 Podcast Cafe.
This is the golden age of podcasting, and it's time to stop thinking and start doing.
Studio 21 Podcast Cafe.
Get your message heard 24/7, 365 over and over again.
Studio 21 Podcast Cafe.
Welcome to the 21st century.
Welcome to the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe.
Here's the creator and host of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, David Garofalo.
Welcome, everybody, to the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. This is a 21-minute or less weekly podcast to help you get your message out, grow your business, and build your bottom line. Let me help you bring your marketing and advertising into the 21st century. My name is David Garofalo. I've been doing podcasting since 2010, and I've created a six-figure income from doing so. This is a 21-minute or less podcast. So let's start the clock, and here we go. Today's subject is sharing. If your mother brought you up right, she taught you that you should share. If you have a box of cookies and your friends come over, you should share the cookies with them. It's good manners. Some people believe in reciprocity. Reciprocity is practicing the exchanging of things with others for mutual benefit. In other words, if you share with others, they will share with you. If you have a box of cookies and they have a bag of candy, you give them some cookies, they give you some candy, and that's reciprocity. If you are a giver, you will receive. Givers get. That is the law of reciprocity. That's what's believed. Givers get. You're doing a podcast, or you would like to be doing a podcast someday. That's why you're listening to this podcast. If you have listened before, you're back. Welcome back. That is because you're getting something out of this show. You're receiving something. It is probably valuable information that can help you. If it didn't cost you anything, and you don't need, and I certainly don't need to give it to you, but I do, and you certainly are taking it. If you have some valuable information, to share, would you share it with me? Well, if your mother brought you up right, you would. You see, if you receive something, you're most likely to give also. That is the law of reciprocity. Did you know the best tippers in the world are waiters and waitresses? It's a fact. They are receiving tips, money that's given to them that doesn't have to be given. It's a choice. And they, in turn, give back every chance they can. It's reciprocity. Podcasters in general are givers. They share. It's the fundamental reason for doing a podcast, to share. Podcasters share stories. Podcasters share information. Podcasters put out podcasts so everybody can receive. And with some podcasters, the hope of reciprocity. The hope is that that person receiving the podcast likes it and will share it too. We here at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe are hoping for reciprocity also. I'm hoping. Reciprocity could come in a few ways. The listener could share the podcast via their social media, like Facebook. Don't you find it interesting that social media has a sharing button? They make friends and they share, because that's what friends do. They share. That's what social is all about. Social is sharing. And if you share your podcast with your, quote, friends, if you share my podcast with your, quote, friends, it could become viral. And we'll get to the viral in a minute, but let's stay with the social aspect of it right now. Part of being social is sharing. Sharing is caring. If you saw a good movie or read a good book that you think your friend would love, would you tell them about it? I think you would. If you heard a great message in a podcast that your friend would find helpful, would you share it with them? You would, wouldn't you? If someone keeps giving to you, wouldn't you be compelled to do something for them? I think you would. I think most people would. Now, as a podcaster, you are delivering free information, knowledge, stories, and entertainment to your listeners and hope they pass it on and share it, especially if you're selling something. The hope is that reciprocity is going to kick in. So how can we help that along? We'll look at what might help make that work in just 1 minute. But first, do me a favor. For just 60 seconds, listen to this.
If you're in the area of Boston North into southern New Hampshire and you're thinking about doing a podcast, there is a place you have to see. It's called Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. Located right over the border into Salem, New Hampshire, Studio 21 Podcast Cafe is a live, working, full-service podcast and vodcast, that's video on demand, studio. All professional equipment, professional producer, and total distribution of your podcast is done for you. Would you like search engine optimization for more people to find your business or better ranking on Google? Well, Studio 21 Podcast Cafe can do it all for you for far less than you think. Schedule a free 21-minute, no-obligation consultation by going to www.studio21podcast.cafe. That's studio21podcast.cafe. Now, back to the program.
And we are back, and today we're talking about sharing. And I asked something of you before we went to a commercial break. Do you remember what it was? I asked you to listen for just 1 minute. And I hope you did so. During that 1 minute, I played a commercial. I hope you didn't fast forward. I hope you actually listened to it. And if you did, you learned something. You learned of an opportunity to help you get your podcast going or to help somebody else that's already doing a podcast or your podcast that's already going to actually improve it. The commercial could have been for anything. The stats say that people actually listen to the commercial content to podcasts more than they do so for TV and radio. So why would that be? Because the listener feels it is the right thing to do. It's the least they can do. The listener will also buy from the advertiser that is supporting the program that is helping them. It is the listener's opportunity to give back, not directly, but indirectly to the person who has helped them. If the listener wants to help the podcaster directly, he or she can share the podcast or the podcast episode on their social media platform. Remember, sharing is caring. The podcaster should be asking the listener all the time to please subscribe, and here's my ask, share it. Please share this podcast to your social media and copy the link to the show to emails and give it to your friends and colleagues who might be interested in the subject. In this case, podcasting. Don't expect it to just happen. Push it along. Ask. Like I'm asking you. Share it on Facebook and Twitter, please. There's nothing wrong with asking. If you're getting anything out of this show, please share it. Don't keep it to yourself. Your mother didn't bring you up that way. Share. Getting your podcast to go viral is another thing, and it's not easy. And something that is misunderstood by a lot of people. There's been countless books and articles claiming to teach people how to make their pitches, videos, articles, and even podcasts go viral. Going viral simply means spreading rapidly throughout the population, being frequently shared with a number of individuals. There is no secret formula. Actually, most people have had something go viral on them by accident. Viral comes from the word virus, which is a medical term used to describe an infectious agent that can be infected all types of organisms. On the internet, a piece of content can spread like a virus if people become infected with what they see and share it. There's no specific numbers of shares, likes, retweets, reblogs, or any other measure needed to be reached out in order to claim the viral status. Simply growing a lot faster than usual, spreading faster than you ever expected, is viral. Going viral requires help from your listeners, fans, and friends. It can't go viral without people sharing. And they only can share if they care. And they only care if you provide them with a reason to care. Maybe that's through knowledge, teaching, or telling you something you didn't know already, or explaining to you in a way that helped you understand. Maybe it's entertainment. You had fun listening to the show. I kept you company during your commute from work today. Maybe it introduced you to a subject or a matter that you've never known about that interests you. In some way, you cared about it, and if you cared, someone else would care too, wouldn't they? Shouldn't you share with them? Remember, if your mother brought you up right, she taught you that you should share. Thank you in advance for sharing and caring. I hope you learned something today, and I hope you cared enough to share. And finally, I hope this individual show goes viral, and it can with your help. Next week, major monetization. I will share a story how I will share a story of how I brought in over $250,000 to my business last year, simply by answering an email from a listener. We'll learn that next time, right here on the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. That's my 21 minutes or less, and we are out of here. You've been listening to the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, live from the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe on the United Podcast Network.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.